Welcome to the Building Doctor Show with Jens Johansson.
Hi, welcome to the final Building Doctor Show of 2024. I'm your host, Jens Johansson, and glad to see you here to learn more about your building. This final episode of the year isn't just any episode, it's our special Best of 2024 edition. This year has been a journey filled with insights, challenges, and solutions that have helped our communities and buildings grow stronger together. We've had incredible conversations, shared expert advice, and tackled a lot of your great questions. And today we're visiting some of the highlights that made this year so special. But that's not all. I'm here with some brand new Q&A content addressing the questions you've been asking to help both you and your buildings grow stronger and healthier. As this episode falls right on the last day of 2024, this may be a nice wrap up for you and your community. So enjoy the show, make yourself a warm drink or something stronger. And we hope this episode inspires you as we step into 2025. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe and let us know in the comments what topics and questions you wanted us to cover next year. Let's get into it. So sloped roofs, the advantages of sloped roofs, the phrase I use to every designer is don't be a dope, slope, okay? We want water running off it. We want gravity is free. Gravity never needs any maintenance. You don't have to change the batteries. The power never goes out. It slopes, it drains. So that first advantage there, effective drainage, it's a different aesthetic appeal. Usually lower cost. There's a wide variety. You can get a whole bunch of different colors of these shingles. You can get wood. You can get all sorts of different looks to it. But it's got some disadvantages, and the pictures in the photo look pretty ugly. There's some blended in shingles there. But we've got shorter service life and maybe access difficulty. It's a little steeper. You got to tie off. It's harder to get up and down on your roof.
The shorter service life is typically due to UV damage or aging from the sun. Sun exposure, and like I say, as water runs across it, it takes the granules with it. So, and once that fiberglass, reinforcement starts to show, that's usually the first sign is that the edges of your shingles, you start to see that little bit of fiberglass. And if you look in the gutters, you start seeing a bunch of granules from the actual shingles. That's when you start to know that it's aging and starting to wear.
Okay. All right. So then low sloped roofs. Here's a picture of a big flat roof. Is this one of the schools we're working on? What is this?
Yeah, this is a high school actually. This was the base sheet that you see there, the black, which is the bottom layer of the membrane. That was kind of that peel and stick fully adhered, and then the white membrane, which you see on top, was actually torched. You can mix and match depending on the system. And sometimes we do more of a peel on the bottom because of the wood deck, so you don't set it on fire. And then the other is so that you could torch the top, which you get better adhesion, for wind uplift. And then the seams also are adhered a little bit better.
Okay.
It's a good durable roof. Typically we usually ask for 20-year, no dollar limit warranties when we do our designs. We always design to a Class A fire rating, which is, like the best fire rating you can get. I mean, it's basically for like hospitals, fire stations, stuff like that.
Okay.
These membranes have better UV resistance than the shingles do. It's just in the manufacturing process. They tend to hold up better. They're definitely more durable.
Okay. Yeah. But they do cost more.
They do cost more.
One of the disadvantages.
They do cost more. They do take a longer to install because like I said, they're multi-layered. So you'll have a roof deck. You'll typically have some kind of underlayment, and you have to install boards of insulation, and you have to, install that base membrane and that top membrane. So even, if it's a single ply, it still takes longer than it would be for like a shingle roof to get installed.
Gotcha. Can you tell people what sloped top mounted insulation is and why we use it?
Okay. So when people build the buildings from, from new construction, sometimes they have a structural deck. And if they build the deck and it's absolutely completely flat, that doesn't, promote water draining from the drains. So what we have to do when we put the roof on is actually take tapered pieces of insulation, usually polyisocyanurate, or they call it ISO or polyiso.
So it's a hard styrofoam.
It's a hard foam board that's insulation, and those come as sloped, kind of tapered panel systems that are put together. And the manufacturers usually can, perform and put together a layout of where you need these panels, how many panels you need, so that we can get all the water moving directly to the drains or to the gutters, depending on.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, we have a slide on that. And so I wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit. But so here's some common roof types. Like I said, we see a lot of shingle around here. PVC, it's kind of that white, or the TPO will be kind of that white or gray. The SBS is or the built-up roofing, that's that asphalt torch down product. Metal, of course, is a good one and a durable one. Then you get these EPDM, the rubber, why do we use the rubber roofs, and where are they used specifically?
So you can use rubber roofs in a lot of places, particularly a lot of places that you can't use the PVC. And
why?
Flexibility is the number one. You can definitely do more with it. It's easier to install in colder temperatures, although sometimes, depends on if you're fully adherent it, then you may have an issue. If you're doing them mechanically attached, then it's less of an issue. It's easier to repair for contractors. It's easier to repair the EPDM, because I've seen people come at PVC and TPO with, built up roofing supplies trying to patch it that way, or some kind of tape, which is, if you do that, it's a temporary repair. The PVC and the TPO require a heat gun or heat to actually weld to it. The EPDM just requires primer and then a pressure sensitive tape to repair it.
Kind of like back in the day, the old bike tube, inner tube repair kits. Correct. A little glue and stick a piece on there. So yeah.
Cost wise, I think in this region, and this varies state to state, city to city, I think the EPDM is slightly more expensive than the TPO and PVC, but not much.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to talk about overlays versus tear-offs. So what do we mean by an overlay?
So an overlay is when you have an existing roof, whether it's steep slope or low slope. So if you have a shingle roof and you want to overlay, means you put another shingle roof on top of it. And by code, you're allowed to have only up to two roofs, two layers. With a flat roof or a low slope roof, you usually have an existing roof. You put down some kind of cover board, and then you put down another membrane on top of that one. There's some pros and cons to it. You can't get the long warranties for these. Usually you can get 10 to maybe 15 years. Some manufacturers will go further than that. We typically don't see them lasting longer than that. Okay. It's more of a, I guess you call it a little bit of a stopgap, as to not being able to replace it. If you don't have the money, then yes, okay, let's get an overlay.
But you don't have to tear off the old one, so you save that money.
You don't have to tear off. You save money by not having to remove the old roof. Some people say, like I say, it's less destructive because it's a little bit quieter. You don't have to worry about them actually banging on the deck trying to get that roof off. Usually they screw in through that old roof, and then, like I say, the new membrane is the waterproofing. Like I say, for disadvantages, you are increasing weight because you are adding more material to the roof. Right. So weight on the structure is something you got to consider. Like I say, shorter lifespan because you have an existing roof there that's already gone bad. Now you're just putting a kind of a short-term roof on top of it. So if that one fails, you got to tear it all off anyway.
And it's all coming off. So you're kind of kicking the demo cost down the road because now it's going to be double the tear off.
Correct. The other downside about this, if you do an overlay and your original roof was bad, and I'm gonna put an overlay over the top of it. Well, you never get to see that underlying structure, that roof deck, and see what kind of water damage was caused to that by all the leaks. Like it was leaking before you decided to replace it. That water went and did damage to that wood deck, or start rusting that steel, that steel deck, or start causing trouble underneath it. And some people would say, well, we want to overlay, but
so
I always say if you're going to do overlay, definitely do a moisture survey, do an infrared survey, find out if there's water trapped.
Little investigation.
Find out if there's water trapped in that existing membrane before you even think about trying to do an overlay.
Otherwise, you're going to put a new hat on an old problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So tear-offs. Talk to us about that.
So tear-offs, you get to see that underlying structure. You tear everything completely off. Fresh start. I can see if I have any damage in the structure or roofing deck. I can repair that at that time. Brand new underlayment, brand new dry insulation, 100% new roof. And like I say, you can get warranties. We get 20 years, you can get 30-year warranties. They do exist, depending on the type of system and the type of membrane, the product. Like I say, disadvantages, it costs more because you have to tear all of that roofing off and dispose of it. It's a little bit more disruptive, a little bit more noise because you have to tear it all the way down. And that roof deck, once you get there, it's not much between you and the inside. So some people say, oh my God, there's so much noise, there's so much noise. But I mean, it's kind of, the noise is about somewhere on par with shingles and them banging on the, about the same. So you tear a shingle roof all the way off, you put it back on, they still got to bang and bang, bang, bang. So built up roof is a little bit louder, but it's manageable.
Yeah.
They'll do it in occupied buildings, commercial and residential. So can be done.
Great.
It's crazy. It's a crazy conversation and a very dynamic topic as organizationally Trinity is engaged all over the United States, and the variabilities from state to state are significant right now. The one thing that is common is a growing concern about our utilities' ability to fund us with power.
This is the grid, you would call it, I guess.
There are lots of studies out there in relation to the impact of EV charging. I think very few people fully grasp how much power, how much electricity an EV charger uses. They're pretty significant depending on the size and speed in which we deploy. But in the Western United States, specifically in this audience, there are significant growing regulations and legislation. Many of them people are aware of in relation to the elimination of ICE vehicles, internal combustion engines, and the mandate that specifically Washington, Oregon, California, by 2035, any new car sold will need to be an EV vehicle.
I'll pause you right there. This is already on the books.
Already on the books.
Already required in Washington, Oregon, and California that all new vehicles sold must be electric. By when?
2035. Here in Washington specifically. There's questions in relation to the maturation of that process and whether they're going to have to amend it. And the issue comes down to power, right? Available power. I think right now the legislation is passed in all 3 states. So if I own real estate and I'm responsible for recognizing the adoption of electric vehicles is coming at a governmental level down, I would need to be looking at this and getting in front of it as best as possible. In this audience, any aspect in multifamily, the recognition is whether it is a renter or an owner. The data and the research behind if somebody is an EV adopter, what is the number one thing that they're looking for in relation to location? whether they're going to rent or acquire a property. If they're an EV adopter, it's an EV vehicle. It's number one on the list. Can I charge my vehicle overnight? Because it's just not conducive to try to find opportunity charging if you are driving an electric vehicle. And so as this goes from small percentages of adoption that we're dealing with now, and they're bigger in the Western 3 states than they are in the rest of the country, if that tips into any material number of the population, which legislation is saying it's going to have to, then I'd be getting in front of this problem right now for the very basic reason is the fact that the current utilities in the Western United States do not have the power to provide energy for this mandate right now.
Okay, so let's break that down for a second. You said on the West Coast there's more demand for EVs. Do we know why that is? Is that just sustainability or green thinking, or is it Detroit and engines and V8s in the East, Midwest or East Coast, or what do you think is driving that?
Well, I think EV adoption in most cases follows political ideology. That's the primary application, which in the West is left leaning. Opinions, it's just factual. EV adoption is bigger in what would be a blue state than a red state right now.
Okay. And so what about power rates? So Washington, we've got lots of dams, and so it's what, 8 cents a kilowatt hour. So that makes a ton of sense. In California, it's really expensive. So why do you think they're embracing it if it's expensive? Do you have any kind of insight on that?
You're going right after the heart of this issue quick. Honestly, we're in the space. We are, as an organization, apolitical. I say it all the time. I have no agenda. I have no political agenda. We are looking at the functional problem that is growing in this nation in relation to our capacity to fund our lives. An American is absolutely confident that when they flip on the light switch, the power comes on.
Right.
I am telling you that is not a guarantee in the next 10 years.
So
California is already dealing with it, and it is not going to be isolated to just California. And Washington and Oregon, if they think they're immune, they're not.
Okay. So Texas, just over the past couple of winters, they went through some brownouts, and then I recall the Texas governor saying our grid is better now, but then we've just kind of come not out of winter, but we got emails or texts saying please control your heat or try to do your best so it doesn't break the grid. And so are all states experiencing that?
Well, Texas is an anomaly. What very few people recognize is Texas is the only state by their state constitution that has to maintain its own power grid. There is no interconnection of Texas to the U.S. power grid, and so they have their own burgeoning challenges. You could love that or hate that. Personally, I think it's outstanding because they're focused on security. But it creates problems, right? But just because Texas is having a problem doesn't mean it aligns everywhere else, because it's a different grid. I think in the Western United States, I'm just going to go back to, there was about a year ago, there was a headline in the Seattle Times where Governor Inslee said the state of Washington is going to have to buy power from other states by 2050. You can search it, you can find it.
2015 or 50? 50.
50. The reality is that's going to come way before 2050 with the adoption of EV vehicles and the elimination of ICE as new purchases. And I think I said it, but ICE is internal combustion engines. Right. I think the problem is I wanted a journalist to step in and ask the very next question, which nobody did, and that is, if Washington generates more kilowatts per head of any state in the nation, and we're going to have to buy power from other states, so who's going to sell it to us, right? And this is at low level EV adoptions. We're talking about teens. We're not talking about 50%, right?
Right.
And so we have this problem. If I'm a condo owner, if I'm a board, I'm an association, I need to be looking. What Trinity Structures is based on is helping our customers, big brands, big corporations right now, develop energy independence, because they have the resources to see the problem. They're engaged with the utilities. The utilities are telling them you want to build a new site, a new distribution center, but I don't have power to give you. They are realizing they have to generate their own energy. And most of major projects, they have to figure out how to create energy independence, or their business model is gonna be dependent on utilities.
What do we see when you pull into the parking lot at the Garden Inn Hotel, where it's, it has a couple little chargers that you plug in your car, and it takes 15 hours to charge your car? Is that's a level 2?
Level 2.
The
easiest way to define them visually for people, level 2s are generally going to be a smaller box of some sort, usually sitting on a post, attached to a wall. A DC fast charger, or what many call now a level 3 charger, you know what they are. It's like a 6-foot person standing in front of you. They're very big. They're significant, and they drain the grid faster than you could ever imagine.
Okay, so when people come home from work, and let's say I look out in my community and I see 30% of the cars in a couple of years are going to be electric. And so they come home and they turn on their oven to cook dinner, and they've plugged in their car. That's really going to be a big draw on things during that time frame, right?
Yeah, I mean, a level 2, a lower power level 2 charger, which is usually all that's necessary for home. I'm plugging my car in when I get home from work. Maybe we go out to dinner, I plug it in. By the time I go to work in the morning, is it 85 to 90% charged? Yeah, those can be low amperage chargers. Those are going to require a 50 amp circuit. So it's going to require a circuit that you have in your house to be able to power it, but it won't take you more than 50. To get anything beyond that into residential, whether it's multifamily or single family, you would need a dual electrical service.
Okay. All right. So yeah, just to kind of summarize, folks, the slide, why now? And I think, I wanted Darren to elaborate a little bit on what's going on, but some of the bullet points here, more and more electric cars are on the road. So we're getting more and more requests from communities that we work with saying, hey, we need some chargers, or we need to figure this out. And we kind of think I don't know if we have enough, and how do we do this? So obviously folks want to charge at home and overnight for convenience, but it's also cheaper and more convenient than stopping at a supercharger or an over-the-road charger, they're called, that's faster. You can pick up more energy in a shorter amount of time and continue on your trip, but you're paying a higher rate to presumably for the convenience, but also to pay for those charging stations. Newer communities are building these in, but again, they're an upgrade. So if you're lucky, there'll be 2 in the garage. And so what happens if you need more? We want more. We've got a couple, but they're always full. And so, we talked a little bit about the solar being a free way to access the power, but there's also a slow but continuing desire to be ecologically friendly, as well as a little bit of a growing desire to be a little bit more self-sufficient and essentially off-grid thinking, because we've been, forced to turn off our power at 5, or due to storms and other shortages that we've experienced lately. So this is kind of the genesis of what we're talking about today, right?
You all rented a car, you show up back at the car rental place, you drop your car off, they run it through the back, they clean it, they gas it, they bring it back out and give it to the next customer.
Right.
So if your car, if I don't have a DC fast charger, and I'll put this in perspective, right? So if you've driven through any of these like Centralia, Bend, Provo, and you see these Tesla supercharger stations, one of those chargers consumes enough power to power 60 to 70 homes.
Wow.
Right. Okay. So when they buy those Teslas and Hertz says, okay, we need to go put chargers on our facilities to turn those vehicles, I need to have one of those chargers to charge it enough in 30 minutes. Right. Well, the power companies, the utilities didn't have power to give them for those superchargers. So they had to put in level 2s, and level 2s means it took them 8 hours to charge that car. They couldn't gas it up in 5 minutes. They had to wait 8 hours. So nobody ever at Hertz determined operationally how were those going to flow through my business. That's why it failed. Right. It wasn't the car.
Losing a day while it's charging. Yeah.
Well, and it's the rental car companies. This is one of those unintended consequences, and why we have been hired by one of the rental car companies. is because these mandates in the Western United States, if they don't figure out how to get power to these rental car lots,
Right.
there will be no cars to rent at the airports.
Right. And so a rental car lot is just a spare parking lot in the corner of some place that maybe a shuttle runs you to. And so the infrastructure wasn't thought through on how they got the power there, right?
Utilities are telling the rental car companies that it's going to take them 5 to 10 years to get them infrastructure to increase their power.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Which also applies to a condo.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
This is the important topic of this conversation, and that is the fact that if I am not, as an association, a board, planning for this conversion now, I live in the PUD and PSE trade areas up here in Washington, right? And we meet with all the utilities, and the utilities right now are saying it is 5 to 10 years before we can address this problem for any commercial or large residential site, right? Multifamily site. It's a huge problem. And if you wait to get in front of it, you'll be too late.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. So nice segues. Everybody, and have we piqued your attention? This, like I said, doing research on this, I was like, whoa, didn't think about that.
So beams in general, probably the most important structural member that we deal with in our industry, in the construction industry. I guess a beam, right? This kind of looks like a beam. I think a beam is a long, slender structural member. It has a uniform cross-sectional area. And generally a beam is loaded perpendicular to its axis, right? So several things serve as a beam. I'm sure you've heard terms like joist or rafter or stair stringer, right? All of those serve as a beam. Beams are supported in a handful of different ways, right? We have simply supported beams where there's just a support on either end and a long beam goes across. We have cantilever beams. They are fixed on one end and free on the other, and so on. So in our industry, right, as building envelope consultants, primarily we're going out, we're doing visual observations in the field, and we're looking at decks, we're looking at stairs, we're opening up some wall cavities and assemblies like that, roof assemblies. So yeah, we're looking at beams that support joists. We're looking at rafters that support roof loads. We're looking at stair stringers that support stair treads. So a whole bunch of beams. Let's talk about materials of beams, right? So we're in the Pacific Northwest. We have timber. We're in timber country. So primarily we're dealing with wood, and the exterior application. We see, you guys are probably familiar with saying pressure treated. Well, we like to say preservative treated. So yes, the wood that you see has been treated with a preservative. It has been run through a machine and striated. So it's got all these little divots and dashes inside of it. And then they soak it and push material into that lumber. The species of lumber is very important. So we talk about Douglas fir, or we talk about hem fir, or we talk about Western red cedar, right? All these different woods have different strength properties. So primarily when we're building houses, we're using Douglas fir as a lumber to frame. It's strong, it's plentiful in this region. On the exterior application, we talk about preservative treated lumber. That's a different species. You probably didn't know that. We use hem fir for the preservative treatment because it actually absorbs the treating chemical more so than Douglas fir does. So with that, the hem fir is actually a little bit less strong than the Douglas fir. So as engineers, we need to be thinking about those strength properties when we implement designs and repairs, and we have to be thinking about the strength of the materials that we are using to get your project to the finish line. So fun little fact there. There's also concrete, right? Reinforced concrete beams. We see that everywhere, especially in parking garage structures. And then of course, steel. Steel is, strong. It's relatively inexpensive. It's easy to get. So yeah, we uncover a lot of steel, but Pacific Northwest, it's timber country. So we can talk about some of the ways that we want to investigate, right? So primarily we get called out to a project, and what's our number one tool that we use? It's our eyes. So we look at something, and based on the number of properties and places that we've worked in, our background in construction, engineering, and architecture, we have a pretty good educated eye and can pick up some things that you might not normally see, whether that be staining or a little bit of difference in texture. Maybe something like we might look like peeling paint or bubbling, but it's actually on the wood surface. So we can kind of hone in and focus. And then, you know, we have an array of tools that we use to kind of poke and prod around, right? Whether it be a pocket knife or little hooks, awls and pokers, fun little prying tools. I'm sure you've seen Jens using a pencil or even a pen, just poke it with a pen. But these are great little indicators to kind of feel around and see what's soft or firm or whatnot. You know, aside from some of those hand tools that we have some other fun, cool, you know, technical tools. We have, you know, moisture meters, devices like this, non-invasive moisture meters. So you can simply hold these on a surface and they're going to tell me if it's wet or not. We have some invasive moisture meters that have, you know, little pins that we can poke into wood and it tells us if something's wet or not. And when we see things are wet, right, that's going to lead us to, tends to lead us to the damage, right? We're following the water, we're following the leaks. We have thermal imaging cameras. Now, this isn't a water detector camera, right? This tells me a change in temperature. So I take that information and I correlate that with an assumption that there might be water or something. So these aren't tools that say, I'm a damage detector, right? They're measuring content, they're measuring temperature. And then we take that information and we help reinforce our assumptions, basically. We have data loggers that we can place in crawl spaces and attics and areas, and we can record temperature and moisture content over the course of a day, over the course of a week, over the course of a month. And then look at those spikes, those peaks and valleys on moisture content and determine if there's ventilation concerns or moisture concerns. We have relative humidity sensors, right? So a fresh slab of concrete, we're going to be putting some sort of a coating over the top. How do we know when that surface is at optimal moisture content to be able to take that manufacturer's coating? We have to know the relative humidity. Well, we can place these sensors inside of a slab and then come take periodic measurements. So there's so many different tools we can use to help us find moisture content or temperature or things like that to help us kind of get to the finish line on that, on projects. I see one of our engineering staff, Stephen Ting, out in the field, and we can see a deck here. And basically that deck's got a waterproof coating on it, and we're looking at a beam. He's basically leaning his ladder on a beam that's supporting some framing members. So we can see Stephen is using, you know, the trusty awl, right? It's a sharp poker, and you know, he is probing the beam, and you can see that just that awl right there embedded about 2 inches into that member. So he's basically looking around. You're going to see a column, a vertical column there. It looks pretty damaged. I don't know if you can see kind of the change in texture there, but you know, these are generally going to be the locations, right, as they sit and absorb water, deteriorate at an accelerated rate, and that's primarily where we're seeing damage. This beam here towards the end. So, you know, these are indicators that we use before we break out the big guns, so to speak, to go out and take a glance at a structure. We're looking high. What's above? Are we supporting 3 stacks, like in this instance, and a gentleman that you see there? So these are some of the things that we have to do in an investigation to determine, hey, is there time to help develop a scope, or do we need to implement some temporary shoring, right? Temporary shoring is going to be a structure that supports this structure in the interim while we help develop a scope. So that's a big facet of what we do at J2, aside from just going out and doing our observation, right? We're determining if there are life safety issues. And if we determine that there is, we need to come up with a plan relatively quickly to ensure that we have a safe community, right? And the people are safe in the interim while we're developing that scope of repair, that permanent fix. So yeah, you can see some of the good indicators on the side of this beam is the separation. You can kind of take a look at that without poking it, probably think there's probably some moisture issues here. So, that's where it takes an educated eye, but, he's got this wall opened up. You can see that there's some gypsum wallboard or drywall, if you guys want to call it that. A lot of times you'll hear GWB, right? It stands for gypsum wallboard, and it's very brittle, and the paper face is deteriorated. So there's a lot of wrinkling on the weather-resistant barrier here. So really, there's been water leaking in this wall cavity for a long time, and now you're starting to see, it wreak havoc on the structure. So a comprehensive repair plan is going to have to be implemented here. But, this is some of the preliminary work that we do to try to determine the condition of this particular structure. So here's a project that probably don't need a moisture meter on this one, LOL. So we're basically probing this beam. This is a landing beam taking stair stringers, supporting stair stringers, and literally this structural member is full of water. So, sometimes video is probably the best form to be able to relay this. As a picture here, I see wet, but this could be active rain or water. But we had to record this one because this is something that you don't normally see every day. So we had to implement shoring, and shoring is basically just a temporary structure to support a structure that can no longer support the code required loads, or the loads that it was designed or intended for to support. Literally a very juicy beam, to say the least. These are samples that we were able to take back. So, I mean, the cat's out of the bag, right? But some of the indicators, right, of what might constitute damage. We see, some of these lines here, these checks in the beam. We see the staining coming out, the discoloration. Those are all indicators that we would want to, perform some resistance drilling or stress wave testing, or certainly poke and prod at it. Maybe not necessarily cut the thing in half, but if I'm walking through a job site and I see this, that's an indicator to go over and take a closer look. Let's sniff a little bit harder. So, as we, we can jab at it. Look, there's the pen, right? And he's gonna feel it. He might even break out a pocket knife or something like that and just give it a little jab, and it still feels solid. He's sounding, right? There's a sounding, knocking on it. Does it sound hollow? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You never know. Wood's different. It's organic. It's got a different grain. Every tree grows differently, right? So there are species, but this isn't a composite material, right? It's organic. We're jabbing at it. It's solid. Look, his probe isn't just sinking in there. So that's where we utilize these kind of instruments, or these kind of instruments, to basically help us determine, before we just saw the thing off of the chainsaw. So, and then as we can see, the cat's out of the bag, but the most economical probe you can use, it's a G2 pen.
Edge perimeter. This is where the pressure treating soaks in. You can see those knife marks, and that's where the chemical soaks into this outer ring. So you have this nice hard shell, if you will, but then you've got just a totally soft.
There it is.
Totally soft inside. It's like a custard-filled donut. That's that end. Then we go around to this side, and you can kind of see the same thing. Oh, you can see the water.
The juice.
Check out the juice. So this is that brown juice coming out that we were first looking at on the edge of the beam. And so again, if I can stick a pen through this thing, that's not a great thing. So before below grade waterproofing. Ken, I'm seeing waterproofed concrete walls. I'm seeing irrigation sprinklers right against the footing. Then that bottom right photo has some pipes in it. Tell us what's going on in here.
Yeah. So usually what people notice, like for below grade units, is some moisture in the condo or in the house or in that room.
Musty smell.
Yeah, musty smell.
Wet socks when I'm walking through the carpet.
Yeah. Yeah, soaking through there. It could be just dampness on the wall, things of that nature. So, so one of the things is the drainage. How's the drainage on the perimeter of the building? And then also how is the foundation waterproofing? So like in the lower right pictures, there's many times we've excavated along the foundation and just see standing water in there. And so that top pipe that we see is probably the tight line roof drains. The bottom pipe is a footing drain. The footing drain is either, clogged or broken or something of that nature, compromised. So none of that water is heading out. So anyways, that's one issue. If a footing drain is compromised, it's going to hold water. Water can get in either under the footing or into the foundation wall. The other photos we kind of see is, foundation walls that are starting to get prepped and cleaned for waterproofing. You could see what people don't realize is concrete, unless there's an admixture beforehand, is actually very porous. It's almost, if you look at it in a microscopic visual thing, there's a lot of little holes in it and capillaries in there. So a lot of water goes through that system and then dries into the interior. And people have electric heat and stuff usually, and that pulls in the moisture when you're in a below grade condition. So these are just photos that show, here's concrete exposed. We see in that lower left, even the upper right, that joint, there's a joint usually depending upon how the footing and foundation is poured, but there's a cold joint between our footing and our foundation wall. Yeah. And that's really critical point as well. So
critical to waterproof. Yep.
Very critical. Yeah.
So this upper right photo, here's your sprinkler system. It's not a directional sprinkler system, it's a 360. And so it's just right against the footing, just wetting the footing every time the irrigation system turns on. Anytime you can see the bare concrete, there's no black waterproofing or membrane here. It's just, they just push dirt up against it and called it a day. I don't see footing pipes in it. Here I see your footing drain and your tight line, but I also see membrane with a drainage mat. But this is, I think you had just dug down to measure where we're at, and you just see the perched water or the standing water. So we're lucky this building isn't floating away. And so there's a lot of below grade waterproofing. It depends on your site. They all have different water tables and things like that. So we're going to talk about perforated pipe. That means it has these holes in it, and it's designed to let water in. So that puddle of water we saw on the previous slide, it's designed to, hey, I can get into this hole, and now I'm in this pipe, and I can run pretty freely down to the drain. So that's what a foundation drain does. The tight line pipe in the right photo doesn't have holes. It's tight. Doesn't have holes. There's no holes. And it also has these upward, what do you want to call them? Downspout pipe connections, up legs. Yeah. And so you can see we've got a nice cap. We've got, it's getting ready to be dropped into the trench, I think. And that's where your downspout will tie into. So this is the tight line. This is the perf pipe. I'll even back up a photo for everybody. Tight lines, typically your tall one, and your foundation or your footing drains down at the footing level. And so that's the perf pipe one. Not a good thing we hear. It's like, I don't see any leaks in my unit. And unfortunately, here we've pulled off the interior drywall. Unfortunately, it takes a while for that water to come through your 2x4 wall cavity or 2x6 wall cavity that's full of insulation and all this stuff. So it takes a while for that water to penetrate, get into the flooring, soak the flooring, get all soft and spongy. And so just because you don't see wet carpet doesn't mean you don't have water damage around the corners of your windows. As you can see, we're looking at the back side of the exterior gyp or back side of the exterior sheathing. And not only is that damaged on the outside, like some of these photos we just showed you, on the inside, it starts getting a little, this is an outlet, and the back of that wire comes through the outlet. That outlet isn't sealed. Your air quality starts to be a concern when you start breathing this stuff, and it smells like rotten sill plate in your bedroom, and why does my room smell wet and musty?
And
Okay.
these things, those
Oh,
are
go
hard to
ahead.
find.
What's that?
Those are hard to find.
They are.
Sometimes you don't,
Yeah.
you don't know what's on the inside. By the time you do, to your point, by the time you see it on the inside, how much effect has already happened in that wall?
Yep.
Yeah. A lot of times we're out just doing a visual to look at walls and windows and, trying to train the eye. What are you looking for? I'm going to look at sealant. I'm going to look at the installation, how it was installed. Can I identify any of those sequences walking inside and outside of somebody's home? And then is there a potential for risk? Do we need to do something additional? And in this case, the homeowner found it.
Yeah. And this is a good little giveaway, the stained carpet. And so some piece of furniture, maybe with metal, tacks in the bottom of the thing to help you slide it around the room, was sitting in the wet carpet for a while. And now we've got rust on the carpet. Why do I have stains on my carpet? That's weird. So this is what's going on in your wall cavity. I mean, the sill framing is shot, and the exterior gyp is nasty. Warranties and guarantees. Let me take you to law school here just quickly. According to the Black's Law Dictionary, it defines these couple things. A warranty, think about it, is a promise for a particular statement of fact, meaning this window has a warranty. The guarantee is an undertaking that promise will bind to the performance of an event, meaning the window itself has a 20-year warranty, but the installer is giving a guarantee that it won't leak for X number of years. And if it does leak, do they pay for the damage that it caused? So again, with product manufacturing, some types of products like roofing, especially, they have an NDL, a no damage limitation clause. So they're actually giving a warranty on the membrane of the roof, but a guarantee that they will fix the damage if their membrane leaks. And so that's just kind of helping us understand warranty versus guarantee. In that second bullet, it's usually the contractor or the installer has that warranty transferring to guarantee. So because we get all this language about my windows have a 20-year warranty, my windows have a lifetime guarantee, why are they having a problem? So warranty, we get into some other little fine print of, is it transferable to original or from original purchaser? Is the fix just the window? Here you go. Here's a new $200 window. It's your problem to install it. Oh, the damage? Yeah, that's not covered in the warranty. Do they reinstall that new window? Then we'll get into kind of fine print from a manufacturer that starts with this. There's no warranty or guarantee if it's used in a multifamily or condominium project. And, what do we mean by that? Wait a minute. My installer knew this was a condo and he put these windows in here, and now I don't have any kind of warranty or lifetime guarantee because it was installed in a condominium project. Lifetime, of who and how long, and of who is original purchaser, the lifetime of the length or the time frame that they actually live there or own the unit. So here's the problem. The original purchaser was the developer. The developer bought those windows from brand X. They're the original purchaser. They're the one with the lifetime warranty. Then they sold the unit to you as the resident. You don't have that guarantee, or that guarantee is not transferable to you. Let's take another situation. The flipper in the, this latest 5 years of, hey, the flipper bought new windows, and when he finished his flip, sold the place. So that warranty lasted as long as the flipper owned it. Or the resident who, hey, my windows look old and tired. I'm told I have to replace my windows. I'm going to sell anyway. It'll sell for more dollar if I put in new windows. They put in new windows and sell their unit. Well, that warranty stayed with the original purchaser. So anyway, understand, read your fine print. Don't get locked into the excitement of I've got a lifetime guarantee when you don't. And so understanding third bullet, installation, understanding, is it a manufacturer / installer? So some of these programs out there for replacement windows are basically white labeled windows. They're not built by that company. They're built by a big name and then sold as that company's name. And so you can ask the manufacturer, hey, give me some names of approved installation contractors that can do this. Is that covering that, Jim?
So just a quick story on limited lifetime warranty. So it is the year 2024 now. So 7 years ago, bought a home, and it was a new home, and it had new windows. And then we all went through this thing called COVID, where we had to work from home. And so one of the days I was sitting in my wife's office and I was working, and I looked outside the window and I noticed my window was broken. Not the glass, but the vinyl frame. Vinyl frame had a crack in it. So original purchaser was probably the builder, but since I was the first owner outside of the builder, when I called the manufacturer, they said, sure, it's under warranty. Here is your original purchase order. Surprised they still had it. So they sent me a window.
Just in the mail? Just came Amazon or what?
Yeah, UPS showed up one day and I had a new window. So now it's on me to go replace my window that's broken because the frame is broken. And being in the line of work that I'm in, I knew I didn't want to leave a broken frame in my wall for too long. So while they stood behind their product for a period of time, there was no labor to do any sort of replacement work. So I did find some window manufacturers, window installers that we work with. And I said, will you please do this at my house? Because it was very important to do. And, one thing down with the installation, there's a lot of manufacturers that say, hey, if you use our installation guidelines, we're going to give you an installation warranty. But if the contractor is not trained in those installation guidelines and they don't have some sort of a little card like this says that they went through a class somewhere, there really isn't a guarantee on that installation because the manufacturer is not going to stand behind it. So read the fine print, because yes, there are some transferable warranties. Limited lifetime is a very interesting period of terminology. And then what is covered? Frames are covered at a different rate than glass. So you do have some glass coverage. So if the seal pops and there's condensation inside, manufacturers will send you some new pieces of glass. And then you'll be like me with my one piece of glass that had popped. They said, okay, here's some butyl tape and a piece of glass. Go replace your window.
Okay, now we're going to talk corrosion. So salt spray, salt laden air, fog, mist, kind of that morning marine layer that hovers over the bay and comes up into the shore. It can have extra salt in it. And so this affects all sorts of stuff like structural steel, deck bolts and mounts, light fixtures, signs, electrical things, just all sorts of things that have any other kind of grade of metal that will be affected by this corrosion and this extra salt. So this picture is an interesting one. That's a magnet, and we're pulling what out of it?
Just metal shavings, basically. Yeah.
So this is an old top deck mounted rail post hole that was patched over, coated over, and then the railing moved a little bit, and the membrane is worn away, and we're actually able to pull old metal bolt shavings and things like that out of this hole. And then of course the metal railing itself is rusting and staining the membrane. You can see the stain all over it. In the left photo, you can see some we call red iron or structural steel. It's really getting rusted and pitted, and it's having a number done on it. But this is a lakefront property, and we've shown other pieces of. Let's see, I think I have a piece of metal here that we peeled off one of these pieces of structural steel, and just the rust is flaking off like flake coming off in flakes. Okay, here's some steel metal pan deck. Remember, we were under the building and we looked up and we saw that nice metal looking pan deck. It looked like this area, but this this is some metal pan deck that was exposed somewhere and is getting just really rusted out. Then we get into some other kinds of siding. This is an interesting, we have a project that had the rusted look, we call it. So it's that architectural metal look that's designed to kind of turn a patina, get a little rusty. And the thinking behind it is that a surface layer of rust develops, and then the rust itself stops. And so, but when you add that salt, it just keeps going and keeps going. And so it doesn't stop. And here's more of that, you get these pitting holes. You can actually see some of the metal siding rusting through, and we've got some holes in it. It came out to the site looking like this. Was designed to kind of have an orange tint to it, but it definitely is not designed to pit and flake and chunk out and rust through. And so we'll get to some of these. We'll talk about this and manufacturer's warranties a little bit later. But this deeper pitting, the rust look, I think the jury's still out on that as far as if it's cool. I get it. But the rust needs to stop. Otherwise, it's just unprotected steel that degrades.
I think the architectural term is beach funk. I've heard that. I don't know. I kind of like it.
The steps to a healthy building. So we talked about that initial inspection, that initial evaluation, visual inspection. That's, our team goes out and we're looking at what is there. Walls, windows, roofs, decks, below grade. You're just looking at the surface.
Right.
The invasive portion is when we peel the onion. We're going to pull a little bit of the materials away to see what's underneath. How is it performing under there? Everybody can see when paint gets a little UV sunburn, with what's happening behind it. Developing the plan, specs, and scope of repair. That necessary binder. I've got lots of 3-ring binders in my office. I don't usually just have a concrete wall behind me. There's a bunch of binders that have all these projects and their scopes of work. Working through the funding process. It's tough, but sometimes there are energy rebates and utility rebates. Replacing windows, oftentimes you're going to get an energy rebate. Same with roof insulation or wall insulation. So look for those little things. I had a project, another shameless plug. We had a project, 8 years ago now,
and they were doing new siding and new windows. And they were gonna hold off on doing the roofs, but they had a very large project in the building envelope. And because they had older style windows, we submitted for an energy rebate. And the local utility company reached out and said, okay, here's what you guys are gonna qualify for. But if you replace the site lighting, so think parking lights, you've got lighting over parking. If you replace those with LED, then we can bump this up. So doing a real quick analysis, it cost them $10,000 to replace the street parking lights, and they got an extra $50,000 from the energy rebate. And they, after everything was said and done, they had a check for $134,000. Now it's a very small drop in the bucket on a $2.5 million project, but there's $134,000 that they just saved. They got from the local utility company. They can help offset that loan balance, and everybody has a more efficient home.
Yeah, and an unforeseen circumstance that happens with this, we try really hard to guide our communities at FCS through this process specifically, because energy companies are really interested in reducing power draw and getting those more energy efficient fixtures and lights and all those kind of things. LED lights don't fail like regular halogen bulbs do. And so those street lights, all of a sudden, I'm not having to go out and have somebody repair them every couple of years. And so my costs down the road also decrease. It's really an interesting way to kind of deal with this repair process of looking at it holistically and what is available there.
Yeah, your service and maintenance forecasting then are reduced.
Yep.
So you can offset that, and now we can put it into another bucket, and maybe we want to get the pool fixed sooner, or whatever the case may be. You can shift where those funds are going.
Yep.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about the hidden nuggets in your CC&Rs and rules, and I promise it's going to be interesting. We're going to look at an actual set of rules today and see how fun, crazy this association will be to live in. Hint, they can take your dog. They can make you clean your unit. They can pull out your hot tub, and they can fine you for your free speech signs and flags. So if you think that's crazy, during the show, dig up your own CC&Rs and rules and read them, and then ask me your specific questions at the end, and we'll see whose rules are the best. Now let's jump into your condo docs, your CC&Rs and your rules. We've gone through kind of the purchase and sale agreement. I made an offer. I've done my due diligence. Now we're going to look at, bylaws, CC&Rs, rules and regulations. All right. Defining common areas and the obligations to maintain, and who has control and responsibility for common areas and not. So think landscaping, pools, pickleball courts, parking lot in the corner. Who mows the lawn in front of my unit? So we're in a townhouse style. Am I responsible for the lawn, running from my party walls to out to the sidewalk? Or does the association mow that whole strip and then it looks uniform and clean? So who washes my deck or windows? Who cleans my gutters? This type of stuff we'll talk about the control and maintenance of the common areas and what is a common area. And so what other things do I have to do on top of my dues or on top of my maintenance? So the maintenance here talks about that. So the association shall have full responsibility for the maintenance, repair, replacement of common areas. And then it gets into all this little stuff. And then it says including party walls. Okay, so party walls in a townhome or in a condo, they're the walls that divide two units. It's the shared parties share that wall. Oftentimes there's plumbing and electrical in there. And so what this says is the board can come into your unit, cut a hole in your living room wall to get to the plumbing and fix it. And then they have to repair everything and come back out. So, how much access does the board have to my unit? And then this one talks about restrictions for the use. So normal, residential units are restricted to residences and for social, recreational, and other reasonable activities. So they say remote home offices are fine. but no employees, no customers, and we're not open to the public. Okay, so now I've got this home-based tax accounting service. Do clients come to my office or am I online? I've got a tattoo parlor in my garage. Well, 1 or 2 people come over, but what times? Are they coming over at 11 p.m. after they've had a few drinks and they want a tattoo? Okay, how about haircuts? Hey, I cut hair at my kitchen table. What about that Amazon dropship business that a big U-Haul truck pulls up to in front of the parks in the road, has the pallet jacks and wheels into the garage, and hey, this is my home-based business. Well, your delivery truck every day blocks the road. So determination is up to the board and, shall be binding on all owners. So here the board can say no tattoo parlor, but yes, you can do massages. So it also talks about adult family homes shall not be prohibited. Daycares are also potential protected class. More on that later. So this one talks about restrictions. So no timeshares, no rentals under 3 months. Think about traveling nurses. Okay. Hotel rentals, corporate suites, crash pads for airline workers where 15 flight attendants share a 1-bedroom because they're always traveling at different times, but it's close to the airport and they can whip over and take a nap or sleep between flights. So there's language about vacation rentals. So the board has the authority. So if you're buying this piece of property to Airbnb it and get rich, read this stuff. It talks about all that stuff. And we've seen all sorts of games and all sorts of, unhappy people when they realized they couldn't do what they thought they could do. So then regulated vehicles, remember the broken down vehicles in the driveway. So we've got, storage on site of trailers, boats, motorhomes, vehicles, trucks over 2 tons. We had a community one time that the guy was running a tow truck service out of his condo, but he parked his 4 tow trucks over in the corner. There's plenty of parking space over there. Nobody parks over in that corner spots. But his trucks were coming and going in the middle of the night, diesel idling and, waking everybody up. And so that was just kind of a big pain. So can you change your oil in your driveway? Absolutely. So you got 72 hours to work on your car, things like that. But then the board can start impounding. And so just think about it. The RV in the driveway needs to go to the RV storage lot down the street. You can park it overnight when you're loading it and unloading it from camping, but it's got to go. But it's good to understand about this if you have, hey, I got high school kids with their cars. So where do they park? Are they parking on the street? I've got a van for my, mobility access, spouse. Where does that park? Is that considered a recreational vehicle, etc.? Okay, signs. Here's the Fox News article. You can see that. And we've got Getty Images credits here. So here's the political Trump sign that's 3 stories high. So this article is about the HOA is fining the resident who thinks he's expressing his free speech, and he's getting a daily fine. And so this specifically calls out political signs. It calls out flags, United States and state flags. It calls out how you can put them. It gives you 90 days before the election and 10 days after and no more. But we've all seen the Marine Corps flag. We've all seen the different branches of the military flags. Are these going to be prohibited? So, okay. It's just, we've all seen the news articles about it. So get ready. This one specifically talks about it. Okay. Pets. So calls out pets, talks about leashes, talks about, picking up pet debris, including food, which attracts rats and stuff like that. No livestock, poultry, rabbits, etc. So my dog was barking all the time, so the board asked me to get rid of him. And we'll see later a rule where the board can literally come into your house and take your dog. And so it's like, whew, interesting. But another interesting, any kind of animals that are generally perceived as dangerous. And that's up to the board. So if your Chihuahua is barking away and could technically draw blood on your ankles, that's dangerous. Not to mention a big Rottweiler or a big, German Shepherd or Belgian Malus, or however you say that name. So yeah, it used to be breeds. Now it's just generally perceived as dangerous. So something to look at. Here's the interesting one. The owner must, at the owner's sole expense, maintain, repair, and replace all these things, and they shall keep such items in good repair and in neat, clean, and sanitary condition, in compliance with all applicable laws. That includes building codes and government documentation, government documents. So neat, clean, and sanitary, and inside your unit. I thought I could kind of shut the door and have a sloppy day off, but my second story neighbor can stare down on my kitchen counter and realize I haven't done the dishes for a few days. And then, so now how far can we take this? Well, the board has authority for neat, clean, and sanitary. It's typically meant for hoarders or slumlords, but we've seen it get a little personal. And, the board can come in and make you vacuum your carpet because it's not neat, clean, and sanitary. So be careful. Just read it, highlight it, and go, hey, I got a question here. Are you going to kick my door in because I left some dishes on the counter? So rules. We're done with CC&Rs. Rules get more specific. So they're not a replacement to CC&Rs. They're kind of a tack on. And so they get more specific. So you need to read both of them. And they talk about the provisions of the CCR will prevail. They're not a replacement, but a supplement, yada, yada, yada. So we get into rules. And it talks here, we define the Architectural Control Committee, or ACC. And so they must approve all changes to the outside of any home or property. It's underlined. No work shall commence without written approval. Send completed applications. They have 30 days to review, and request and ask more questions, etc. And so they can require that an architect prepare plans, and one complete set of plans shall be delivered and permanently left with the ACC or board. They shall have the right to refuse. They can make you change things. They can, you must always follow rules and building codes, things like that. So this one gets into more detail. And then we actually have you need to file an application first and receive written approval before any work can start on a dog run, a little pond in the front, a trellis, a fire pit, painting or staining your fence, putting on a screen door, just doing all sorts of these things. We have a project right now that one unit owner has violated 8 of these things. And it's because they did some backyard work. They added a shed, they moved a fence, they did this. And it's just, and so read this first. We've seen beautiful outdoor deck, gazebo, built-in tiled barbecue things have to be completely torn out. And it's because the ACC is excited about it, and they didn't follow their rules. And wow. So just read it, understand what you can do, ask, get it in writing. So pets, more pets. This is the good one. Barking dogs or other excessively noisy animals may be removed by the board after notice. I'm going to come take your dog if you can't shut your dog up. So I'm here to kick your door in and take your dog. Yeah, yikes. Okay. Welcome to fall. Today we're talking everything about how to autumn armor your building, and that has to do with fall maintenance. So why is seasonal maintenance so important? Well, we've had a break. Our building hasn't had to work all summer except for the AC side of cooling. And so we've had our windows open, so our fans haven't needed to operate, the whole house fans. We've had our patio doors and everything just wide open, getting lots of fresh air. There's lots of good air exchange. The birds have built nests in some of our fireplace flues because there's no hot smoke coming out of them, and that looks like a great place to build a nest. Our dryers are accumulating lint. The furnace filter wasn't clean from when it turned off in the spring, and it's still dirty. So if those things are still dirty, our furnace is going to be working harder. And the temperature's dropping and daylight is fading away. So the ability to do some of this work when I get home after hours is diminishing because I don't want to do any of this in the dark. And so now is the time to get ready. So kind of the biggest challenges buildings face in the winter is obviously it's wet and it's kind of cold. The building doesn't get a chance to dry out. The sealants are constantly getting pounded. The wood trim, maybe it's painted, but it's still, underwater, and it's just, moss starts building up. The shorter sun seasons in the North Hemisphere, roof debris is built up all summer. You don't think of leaves falling in the summer, but the wind blows and it blows things around. The chipmunks are dropping their nuts. The seagulls are dropping their shells if you're living on the coast. And just, stuff is just accumulating, and we got to get that cleaned out before it starts. And we got to kind of check everything to make sure you don't have water coming into existing cracks for that freeze thaw damage to start splitting things apart. Just bottom line, you'll be glad you got ahead of things and not stressed about tomorrow's weather report of, I got to do this tonight in the dark because it's going to snow. Today, in the Halloween theme, we're talking about the horrifying secrets or the spooky things and the scary things we find underneath your cladding and why you need an inspection. This one is the most classic walkway kind of thing. If you've got an elevated building, you're going to have walkways, you're going to have staircases, you're going to have all sorts of things. And here we can see the beams, you can see some of the rails, even the beams on the outside, they look fine. We pulled off some siding to kind of peek around, but you can see the sealant. So who has installed the sealant over the years? And we've got a few different colors of sealant. And so we know they've kept applying and kept applying and kept applying. And actually we had finished our investigation here, and it was right at the end where we literally went over and knocked on a beam to see what was going on inside. And so this is what we found. We can start on this, right-hand photo. You can see it's pressure treated beams. You can see pressure treating from the outside. You can see the knife marks. But on the inside, the pressure treating only goes so deep. The inside is totally rotted out. These beams are basically hollow. And so it's a combination of beams and posts. But here's some big support beams that come into a three-way T intersection. There's a lot of load being carried here, and there's not much left of those beams. Here's some cross sections of a post, and again, 50% of the post is gone here. Over here, it's 90% of the post. And so a real good reminder that we can look at the outside, looks fine, but you start just doing a variety of things. Why is it hollow? Why is there stains here? Why are there weird cracks? Where is the staining coming from? Why are there 5 different colors of sealant? Who's caulking stuff to death? And so we've started looking at beams and posts in a whole new way after this project. And there's actually some interesting tools that can help us with that. Here we're at the deck level. We're looking at a through wall scupper. Scupper isn't done right. This whole thing is mush. So for an invasive inspection, in most cases, you will not need to vacate the building. The inspection team will work in specific areas and minimize disruption, but it's good to check with your inspector if any areas need to temporarily be off limits. And then depending on what we find, if we find the deck is so disintegrated like that one photo, we're gonna block off the deck. We're gonna put up temporary shoring. We're not gonna let you use your deck, and that's all for your safety. And so, do you need to vacate the building? Nope, typically not. So how often and when should I schedule an inspection? Oops, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong one. Will an invasive inspection damage my building? No, just again, we're pulling off small areas of siding. So just select spots of siding that can be replaced and repainted. You might see that temporary opening for a while. If we open it up, find damage, we'll cover it back up right away, weather tight it, and then we'll help you make a plan. Sometimes you want to call, if it's a brand new building, you want to call the builder and say, hey, come look at the damage I found. And then he can come and just peel back the plastic and go, ooh, that doesn't look good. Or, maybe we want to get 2 or 3 bids for a contractor to replace that work, and that takes a little time. So sometimes you'll see these little patches just because we don't want to fix it. Then they open it up again, then they open it up again. So all right, angst number 1. Hey, you work full time. You don't have the bandwidth as a volunteer board member to run the business of your association. You recognize the fact that you need education, training, even mindset or right goals to run your community. So we get it. When you return home from a long day at work, last thing you want to do is answer 20 HOA emails. But we also understand you moved into this community to smile at your neighbors and not have them give you dirty looks or turn away when they see you at the mailbox. And so that angst is, I'm working full time and I don't have time to run this business of being a board. And once board members understand they actually run a small city, they have the power to tax, that's assessments. They have the power to penalize, that's fees and fines. They even have the power to kick you out and foreclose. And so that once board members realize that they didn't just join the board to pick the paint colors and the flowers out front, it gets serious. Nobody volunteered to kick your neighbor out. So you want to get back to a smooth process where your members are happy. And so how can we deal with this full-time, lack of bandwidth and training? We've got some resources in there. So we've got some free resources, but we can also assist you with some kind of paid coaching along the line. But bottom line, getting a good manager to really help you with this stuff, to help you understand what you need, and maybe even an HOA attorney to help you walk through some of that stuff is super helpful. And so good managers can help you through that. So bandwidth. Angst number 2, your whole team isn't leading. Your board members are in the same boat as you are as far as time and training. Your manager's non-responsive, meaning they're busy. They've got lots of managers or lots of properties to manage, and they've got to be going here and there. And this is a common problem we hear with managers of, I've got to have a portfolio of 20 properties and I'm trying to keep up the best I can with all of them. And, the board has to do something. The board has to make their decisions. I can give them a path, but the board has to make their decisions. And so, and then in addition, the contractors are giving you the wrong information. They're just selling you their services. The contractors, construction is broken up into trades. So they do their particular trade really well, but they get in and get out. And if they're selling you roofing products, they're going to identify roof problems. If they're selling you windows, they're going to identify window problems and not necessarily tie those two things together where the roof meets the wall right next to a window. And so it's kind of this, you're only part of the board, but in that first angst, it's like, I don't have time. I got to get off the board. The second part is your whole board is feeling the same or acting the same, and you can't get your manager involved, or at least they're not giving you enough to-dos, and your contractors are just taking the money. So how do we resolve that? So teamwork on the board is a big deal, and it really gets into more, you can call it woo woo in the sense of setting a vision, but here's what we mean by that: community vision. What do we want our community to be? Do we want it to be high rentals? Do we want it to be, a place where young families are welcome? Do we want it to be, 55 and older, and there's regulations behind that? But, do we want it to be high end? I mean, we want all our values to be up. And so we need to set a vision that says we need to pay attention to picking up garbage. We need to pay attention to landscaping and touching up the paint. Otherwise, we start getting this vision of a clearly neglected, run down, thing that's not working very well. And then onto the vision of community, back to that smiling at the mailbox, back to that enjoying maybe a holiday get together and potluck. Do we want a community that supports one another and is friendly, or do we want a community where everybody's left in the dark and we don't really know who's who, don't get along, and all that stuff? So these types of visions, expectations, open communication, and then scheduling these regular seasonal gatherings. There's no vote. Just come have some ice cream. Come have some cookies. Come have some hot chocolate around the holidays, and do a food drive. Something that brings the community together a little bit. Maybe they're cleaning up the neighborhood streets or doing something like that. So think about those things. That's how you can get involvement and get things happening for that. Just not feeling like the rest of the board or your management or your contractors are really connected. Okay, welcome to the Q&A. Our first question is, what do you guys do as building consultants, and what can I consult on from you? How are you different than contractors or builders? Great question. We get asked this so much. Why do I need an architect? Why do I need an architect? Why can't the contractor just do it? I've got a proposal. He says he knows what to do. So we are architects and engineers, and we figure out, number one, we figure out independently what is wrong. And so we're not selling you anything. We're not, a roofer makes money selling you roof products. And so what if that roof to wall is not integrated right? They can put a new roof down, but the siding transition between the roof and the wall. Or if we're just selling windows, everything's a window problem. What's that phrase? To a carpenter, every problem is a nail, or every solution is a hammer, right? So we independently figure out what's wrong. And it's usually a variety of things and how they integrate. Second, we prepare and stamp the plans and specs for permits and contracts. And people say, why do I need plans? Plans are the recipe. They tell you step by step what to do. They give the contractors a graphical representation of how we want it to look, what the colors are, where things stop and start. And so everybody benefits from a good set of plans and a detailed set of specifications. We don't have to overdo them, but it answers all the questions of your WRB has to lap the flashing. The flashing has to be this tall. It has to stay this far off of the trim. It has to have these bends and folds, and sealant goes here and doesn't go there. Things like that. And so then that set of plans and specs is tied to the contract. So I, the contractor, shall follow this recipe and give you a completed project. So if anything were to happen in the future, well, these new windows weren't installed right. Well, they didn't follow plans. Oh, and it's in the contract. So now they're in breach of contract. And so you have a little bit more, you have some authority to say it's not done because it's not done per the plans and specs that are tied to your contract. So third thing, we obtain competitive bids and compare the quotes received for an apples to apples comparison. We try to go out and get 3 bids and say, hey, look, they're all within 5 or 10% of each other. That means they're looking at the same set of documents. And, but why does this contractor have this exclusion when that exclusion is clearly in the plans and specs or the recipe we told them to do? So they can't exclude it and be compliant with the bid documents, right? So we have a trained eye. We can go through their proposals, see what they're, what they've included, what they haven't, what they've missed. We can call them back and say, hey, did you realize you have to do this? And it's on page 4 of the set of plans. Oh, I didn't. Okay, thanks for saving me money or a fight later. And so we can help you put all those together, compare apples to apples, and then you guys can choose which contractor you want. And we like to say you'll choose the most responsive contractor. It doesn't mean you're choosing the lowest bid. And then oftentimes, we'll do that comparison. And then we'll say, let's interview the top 2 and just see if you have some chemistry with them. See if, tell them to bring their project managers and superintendents to the meeting or the interview. And we can kind of see if we have, can get along with these folks. They're probably going to be working on our property for 6 to 12 months. And so we can help you get through that. Then after you've selected a contractor, we act as your owner's rep and help you oversee the work, oversee the contractor's questions, answer any contractor questions. They're called RFIs. Make sure they do their submittals and their mock-ups. Here's the plans and specs say I got to use, this type of sealant. Is that the right sealant you want me to use? And you say, yes, use this color, use this shade or this type of paint and things like that. So we help you through these kind of monthly pay applications. We help you through any kind of change orders or, we opened up the building, we found a whole bunch of surprises and we have some questions. We got to get them answered. We'll be your owner's rep and make sure those things get answered and then make sure the project gets done right this time. So 5th reason, we understand how boards work. We understand insurance and claims and how they work. And how loans and or utility rebates work to help you find more money for your repairs. And so we can explain an overview of the loan process and then put you in touch with good lenders that'll help you. We understand how boards work and how they need to get things approved and voted on and help you with HOA meetings and present to your HOA, big meeting. And just kind of walk you through this whole process. And then after the work is done, the last thing, we can stay connected with you. We view the board as our client and, the property really as our client. And because boards come and go, managers come and go, but we have ongoing relationships with the properties over the past 20 years. And can say, yeah, we worked on your building 5 years ago. Here's all the information that we gave to you at that time. Well, the board's changed 3 times in that time. The manager's changed a few times. We as the new board didn't have any of that information. Oh, that's great. You have it. You know exactly what's going on. Here's what the last board was struggling with. Here's what they were working on. Here's how they were trying to, get these done or what they were thinking in kind of this phased repair process. So we can stick with you and help you stay on top of stuff. So we've worked with thousands of boards, and through this experience, we can help you get this done right the first time and avoid costly mistakes. And kind of, if it's your first rodeo and you are a volunteer board member, and you don't have to become an architect and an engineer and a contractor overnight to figure out how to do this. We can walk you through the whole process and you can decide where to use us. Okay, next question. What are the factors that typically influence the cost and timeline for building repairs? There's about 3 answers to that. So factors that influence cost. How much damage do you have requiring repairs? And that's found through our initial investigation where we kind of take off some of the siding and see what's going on underneath. Do we have water damage or rotten sheathing, bad framing, just all sorts of surprises. And then we can help build your scope of repair saying it's not just siding, it's 20% of the framing, or it's 10% of this. Or now that we're getting into that, we see that that's not the best way to do it. So maybe there's a code change that made things safer and better. Do we have to follow that code process? You know, things like that. Existing buildings do have existing building code. So just because you touched it doesn't mean you have to bring it up in all cases. So the first one is, how much damage do you have? The second one is, how many defects do you have that will lead to water intrusion or further damage? Meaning, is what we call in the business a full strip and reclad necessary, where I have to pull off all the stuff to get to all these defects all over the place? Or can we do just a targeted repair? Maybe this is just limited to the deck stacks are leaking. And so we can just really focus in on the decks and maybe how it ties into the siding. And we don't have to worry about the windows, or, you know, maybe your community was built in phases and phase 2 was just a really bad contractor or set of subs that were terrible. But phases 1, 3, 4, and 5 are great. It's really focused on phase 2. Let's fix those buildings. And so we can help you do, you know, a targeted repair or a complete strip and reclad, depending on how many little defects you have. If you have reverse lap flashings and just problems everywhere, it starts getting to this metric of, if I'm pulling off 60-70% of the siding, it's almost the same price as pulling it all off. And then I have all new warranties, all new life cycles, you know, just everything, instead of a patchwork quilt, if you will. So can we do targeted, or do we have to go full strip and reclad? And kind of the third reason that affects costs and timeline is how long the selected contractor's duration is, because we're typically hired to oversee their work. So a contractor that can bring a big crew in and get this job done in 4 months versus a smaller contractor with a small crew, but they're going to take 10 months. So the pricing may be different with the contractors, but you also want to look at our timeline as overseeing them during the repairs. So of course you'll have to pay for 6 more months of our time watching things. But there's pros and cons. If we have to send out 2 you know, consultants a week to keep track of, you know, 6 buildings under construction, or can just 1 consultant per week keep track of, you know, 1 building going on at a time. So those are different things, and that's how we help fine tune our proposal process when it comes to the construction oversight phase. We really look at the contractor you've selected, how long is their schedule, and, you know, assuming you want us there to watch their work and make sure they do it right this time, that'll drive some of those costs. So damage, defect, and duration. Okay, next question. What do board members and the managers need to know about the useful life of building components, and how can they plan proactively to avoid costly surprises? Good one. So the useful, we call it remaining useful life, or useful life. Forgive my throat. So I'm going to refer you to our maintenance plan, and we'll put that in the chat for you. So it gives remaining useful life or useful life timelines. And so I just want to take a few components that are on the outside of your building. So think about windows. A typical window has a 20-year lifespan, and that's all the accessories and the weather stripping and the rubber and the sealants and the latches and the things like that. We know the glass lasts for a long, long time. Or the frame maybe is not rotting and failing, but how that window is built. So windows, think 20 years. Well, the siding that the windows are next to has 40 years. But the paint that's on the siding and the paint and sealants have 5 to 10 years. And that window in the siding may be right above a deck. So a deck membrane has 5 to 10 years. And so we've got all these things. A roof over the top of this deck and siding and windows and walls has 15 to 25 years, you know, depending on the type of shingle, excuse me, or roof membrane. So we always want to be looking at these things and say, this has a 5-year life cycle. If the deck starts leaking and then it gets underneath the siding and damages everything and rots out everything, I've got to pull off that perfectly good siding that has a remaining 40 years or 35 years because the water got in and damaged the framing. So I got to pull the siding off to replace the framing. then I can put new siding back on, all because you forgot to recoat your decks, or the decks were done wrong or something like that. Or you failed to restore your sealant and water got in. So the big thing there is building maintenance components work together. And so we can, with that maintenance plan and that eye to, annual inspections or biannual, every other year, we can keep an eye on that. Another interesting situation, we see roofs with an attic and the attic ventilation is done wrong. The roof shingle maybe has a 50-year lifespan. But if that attic ventilation is done wrong, like the eave vents are blocked with too much insulation, or there's bath fans disconnected, making everything moldy in the attic, that roof sheathing gets all rotten and spongy. Now I got to tear perfectly good shingles off to replace the roof sheathing and then put new shingles back on it. So that's how we see, overlapping things. So just because one thing has a 40-year lifespan doesn't mean everything has it. So staying on top of that maintenance. So the second question, how is the component installed? So if it has, if it was installed wrong or poorly, it's not going to last its expected life. New construction is unfortunately known for cheap price, and defects are the most, more common. Repairs to one condition may not contemplate or consider needed repairs to other areas. So an incomplete repair can allow problems to persist and repairs needing to be redone. And so you can kind of get into this confusing, well, I just repainted everything. Well, you painted over the rotten siding, or the siding was over a defectively installed WRB or building paper or Tyvek. And, we got to tear that stuff off to get to that because something was installed correctly. So that's the component of that oversight piece that we were talking about earlier. If you're having somebody making sure the contractors are cutting corners, making sure they're following a good written set of plans and specs, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do and follow the contract, you won't have these defects. And so that's why we advocate for us to watch. Third thing is to be proactive about it. The reserve study is a good tool to plan for lifespan issues, but we see many studies or repeated, every 3 years, you're supposed to get your reserve study updated. And so we see them going through the exercise of just updating timeframes. And so here was your last reserve study. I just need to change the dates and change the times, and they don't bother really going to the site and really looking around, or making sure you do a little building envelope investigation to confirm that things are okay. Because again, that siding has 40 years. We did that reserve study 3 years ago, so you should have 37 years left. Done. Well, are you? And so did somebody verify and, make sure all these things are working together? Along that reserve study, make sure your reserves are adequately funded so that you have a budget and bank account to work with. And so this is the proactively avoiding costly surprises. So your reserve study is setting aside, my roof will last 40 years. So I have 39 years left to save for a new roof. So every year for 39 years, I'm taking out a little bit of money and putting it into the roof bank account line item as a part of my reserve study, so that when I get to the end of that time period, I have an adequately funded section to just take from that and fix my roof. So we're seeing lots of properties lately with underfunded reserves as a result from, all the way back to 2008 housing crisis, COVID, other inflation hangovers, and they've just said, hey, it's good enough. We're kind of struggling here. Let's not even look at it. Let's not update our savings. Let's not increase our dues and assessments to set aside proper money. And they're waking up realizing they're 15% funded. So we want you to be at that 50+%. The industry says 70% is a real good number. 100% I think is a little overkill. But if you have some money, maybe you don't have all of it, but you have some money, it reduces in your reserves. It reduces the assessment or the costly surprise, if you will. And then ways to avoid these: update and monitor reserve study, have biannual property inspections by a building envelope consultant, and be cautious of low bid without a set of plans or oversight. And that kind of, we're talking about the circle of how these things go together. As long as I'm capturing these things at the start, they won't come to fruition. Okay, last question. How can boards and managers improve communication with their communities about budgeting for repairs, inspections, and long-term maintenance? So this gets back to that, what I was talking about, these inflation hangovers, or, any kind of economic crisis. Nobody wants to hear that they need to pay more money into a system when no real repairs are needed right this second. I've got plenty of other bills to pay. Or you get that promise of no new taxes under my watch from the incoming president, and you're kind of like, prices were up from last year and they're up from 5 years ago. So why are we still operating on no increases for the past 10 years? I have a feeling we're behind. So budget season requires annual budget planning, and that's budget, but also take some time to include reserve study and really looking at the reserve study. Put those two together because they're about your financial picture, right? So making sure that study has its timelines and allowances for repairs, and the assumptions it's making are correct. And again, your reserves are 50+% funded. And that's what new buyers are looking at. They're saying, hey, what are your dues? How much is the property? And then where's your reserves at? Do you have absolutely no money in your account? So if you go to mow the lawn, you're going to have to give me an assessment, and I'm just going to be pelted to death with little assessments about everything. Not to mention, we have no money set aside for when the roof needs to be replaced or the decks need to be replaced. And so do that annually and talk about it. Talk about it in the meetings or the town halls. We call town halls as open HOA forums. Hey, here's what the board is struggling with. Hey, here's what we're working on. It looks like we're going to be going here and here. Stay tuned for, a vote once we get, actual numbers. Then you have the special meeting where you're actually voting. People have heard about this for a long time. 3 to 6 months. They know it's coming. They can start planning for it and start thinking about it. But we have a community communication tool. We'll put that in the chat for you. But monthly email newsletters, don't underestimate them. Here's the highlights. It's not board meeting, but it's just, here's the highlights in our community. Here's what we're looking at fixing this year. There's going to be some costs for this, and we're talking about doing the roofs next year. We'll patch all the little annoying little leaks that people are starting to get this year, but stay tuned. We'll do a big roof job next year. Those town hall meetings to discuss and not vote, and then official meetings to vote good measures in. And so just to, keeping people informed. Unfortunately, we do work with boards that say, I don't want to tell anybody because I'll just get all these questions, or I'll get, second guessing. And yeah, you got to remind people sometimes of, we were elected to make these decisions. However, we want your input, and we want you to know what we're working on here. So everybody's informed. We're not hiding any secrets. We're following the rules. So that's how boards and managers can improve communication. All right, great questions. So, okay, next slide. Excuse me. Did you know we have free and paid training for boards and managers? So if you want to type, you can type in learn.j2consultants.com/resources, or you can use your little phone if you don't like to type and scan that QR code. So you'll find free training and resources on our website. And if you want some kind of more board coaching, give us a call and we'll walk you through that. We can work with you more in depth, one-on-one. We may recommend a site visit so we actually can see what's going on. We can talk to you. We can dig into your reserve study and just be the advocate in your corner to say, here's what, you should start doing. Here's how I would address that, and give you some advice that way. Okay, then don't forget to stream us. We're on all the favorite podcast places, and do us a big favor. Give us that 5-star review. that gives us fuel to create more stuff. And you can enter your questions, I think, on any of these platforms, and our team of people will see all these questions. Here's a question from Spotify. Here's a question from YouTube. Here's a question from wherever, and we'll throw those into the thing. So thanks for tuning in. See you next year. That wraps up this best of 2024. And so to our amazing audience, thank you very much. Your engagement, your questions, and your trust in us to guide you through the challenges of managing and maintaining your building mean a lot to us. The show wouldn't be possible without you, and we're really grateful to have you part of the Building Doctor community. As we look ahead to 2025, we're excited to bring you even more valuable content, expert advice, and solutions to help your buildings and communities thrive. So let's work on our goals, dream big, and know we'll be right here to support you every step of the way. So from all of us at the Building Doctor Show and J2 Building Consultants, we wish you the best of 2024 and a joyful holiday season and a successful year ahead. Thanks for watching.